Wyoming Territory, 1883. The wind tore down from the Big Horn Mountains, sharp with dust and the scent of snow. Linmai stood outside the dry goods store in Sheridan, clutching a thin coat tighter with one hand and her empty basket in the other. I said no credit, the shopkeeper barked from the doorway, already turning his back. Not for you. She didn't argue, just nodded quietly and stepped off the wooden porch with her chin held high, though her stomach ached with a familiar emptiness. Her son, had eaten the last of the rice that morning. The hem of her worn trousers brushed against the packed dirt, and she blinked against the sting in her eyes. She would not cry, not in the middle of town where every gaze was a judgment. A few steps away, a man leaned against a post outside the livery, arms crossed, hat low over his eyes. His coat was worn but clean, boots scuffed from the trail, and there was a steady way about him like nothing in the world could shake him. He watched her without pretending otherwise. "You got turned away for food?" he asked, his voice low and sure. Mai stiffened, her posture guarded. She gave a small, reluctant nod. "I will manage." The man pushed off the post and stepped closer. He was not young, but not old either. There was something deeply settled in him that made her feel steadier just standing near. "Come with me," he said, simple as a handshake. "I'll see your table is full tonight." She hesitated, her hand tightening around the basket. In her experience, kindness from a white man often came with a price she was unwilling to pay. "Why would you help me?" "I don't need a reason," he said, his gaze unwavering. "You have a child to feed." That's reason enough. Her gaze dropped to the dust between them. Taking charity was a kind of defeat. "It is not charity," he said, as if reading her mind. "It's supper. Come on." Mai looked up at him then, really looked. He had kind eyes, a soft crease at the edge of his mouth like he had smiled once a long time ago and maybe forgot how. She saw no deceit in them, only a plain-spoken certainty. She nodded. He gave a small nod back, then turned and led her across the street to where his horse waited, hitched beside a muddy buckboard wagon. "Name's Owen Croft," he said, lifting supplies from the back. "You can ride up front." "Linmai," she said, her voice quiet. "My son is at our place. Just outside town, by the creek." Owen flicked the reins. "Then that's where we'll go." The ride was quiet, but not heavy, the kind of silence that left room for breathing. The wagon creaked along the dirt road as the sun dipped lower, painting the hills gold. They turned off the main road and followed the creek until her small homestead came into view. The cabin was old, the roof patched with tar paper and hope. A boy stood on the porch, barefoot and thin, watching them approach. "That your boy?" Owen asked. "Yes. His name isn't." He looked sharp. The wagon stopped and Mai climbed down just as and ran to her. She caught him, holding him close for a moment. "We have a guest," she said softly in his ear. "He's brought us supper." And looked up at Owen with wide, cautious eyes. "You have food?" For the first time, Owen's mouth softened into a genuine smile. "More than that." "You like rabbit stew?" Owen's face broke into a rare grin. "I do." Owen unloaded his supplies, salt pork, beans, potatoes, flour, and a good cut of venison wrapped in cloth. Mai's breath caught at the sight of it all. She opened her mouth to say something, but Owen just looked at her and said, "Let's cook." The kitchen was small, but it warmed quickly once the fire caught. Owen worked easily, chopping vegetables while Mai mixed flour and water for flatbread. And sat at the table, his eyes wide, taking in the impossible smell of roasting meat. "You handle a knife like a ranch hand," Mai observed after watching him for a bit. "Was raised on one," he said. "Ma died when I was 16. Learned what I had to." He didn't look up from his work. "My family is gone." Mai stirred the stew. "Mine as well." She did not talk about her husband, who had come to build the railroad and left her with nothing but a small plot of land and a son to raise. He did not ask. It was enough that she stood tall and her boy was alive. That was story enough. Dinner filled the small cabin with a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. Afterward, Owen helped clear the table, then stepped outside while Mai put her son to bed. When she came back out, he was leaning against the porch rail, looking up at the stars. "Thank you," she said quietly. He looked over at her. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to." She stepped closer. "You are a kind man." He shrugged. "I don't know about that." "You are," she said, her voice soft but sure. "It has been a long time since anyone showed us kindness." He looked at her, his eyes catching the moonlight. "It doesn't have to be the last time." Mai swallowed, her heart beating faster, not with fear but with something she hadn't felt in years. "Hope." "You mean that?" "I do." They stood there, the porch boards creaking under their boots, the night quiet but for the wind in the trees. "Will you come back tomorrow?" she asked. "I will," he said without hesitation. She smiled then, real and full. "Good." Owen tipped his hat. "Good night, Mai." "Good night, Owen." He walked down the path and climbed into his wagon. He looked back once just before the bend and saw her still standing there, watching him go, a small silhouette of hope against the dark cabin. The next morning brought frost on the window panes. By mid-morning, Mai heard hooves again, slower this time, deliberate against the frozen ground. She wiped her hands on her apron, her heart steady but full. Owen rode in without hurry. He dismounted and tied the reins to the post, his eyes meeting hers like a question already answered. "You find your way all right?" she asked. "I did," he said. "Come in, if you have a moment." "Not in any particular rush," he said, and followed her inside, removing his hat. Anne, now awake, watched him from his corner with cautious interest. "You remember Mr. Croft?" Mai asked. "Yes," Anne said, sitting up straighter. Owen gave a slow nod. "Morning, son. You help your mother with the chores?" Anne looked to Mai, then back. "I carry wood. I feed the hens, too." "That's good work," Owen said, his voice easy. "A place like this doesn't run by itself." Mai poured hot water into a basin. "There's a section of fence down out back. A deer got through last week." "I can take a look, if you've got spare wire," Owen offered, slipping off his coat as if he belonged there. "There's some rolled under the linter," she said, surprised at how natural it felt. While he worked, Mai brought out her mending basket. The boys' shirts were wearing thin at the elbows. She stitched while keeping half an eye on the yard, watching Owen move along the broken fence line with quiet focus. He didn't talk to himself like some men did. He just moved with purpose. By midday, the fence stood straight again. Owen came in with dirt on his boots and a scrape on his forearm that he didn't mention. Mai handed him a tin plate with yesterday's stew and fresh bread. He sat near the fire. "You've got a good piece of land here. Water runs clear." "It was my husband's," she said, threading her needle again. "He came from Guangdong 5 years back. He put up the beams himself." Owen didn't speak for a moment. "He pass here?" She nodded once. 2 winters ago. A fever took him fast. The quiet between them stretched, not uncomfortable, but full. Owen turned his plate in his hands. "I buried my mother near Lamy. After that, I took work where I could. Drove cattle, helped build the rail grade. Never stayed long anywhere." "Are you planning to stay now?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Is there a reason I shouldn't?" She set her sewing down. "No reason I can think of." He stood, brushing his hands clean. "I'll ride into town. Bring back nails and salt if you're low." She hesitated, then said, "Window glass, if you can find any. That back pane has a crack coming through." Owen nodded. "I'll keep an eye." She walked him out to his horse. "You don't owe us anything," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I know," he said, mounting up. "That's not the reason I'm coming back." He tipped his head once, then turned his horse toward the path. She watched until he disappeared beyond the bend. Inside, the cabin held the scent of stew and wood smoke, and came in with a smooth grey stone in his hand. "I think he likes it here," the boy said. I smiled, running a thumb along the stone's cool surface. "I think he might." Owen returned by late afternoon, his cheeks raw from the wind. He lifted a small crate from the back of the wagon. "Found the glass," he said. "And a roll of oilcloth. Might keep the cold out until the ground thaws enough to set a new pane." And opened the door from inside. "I finished the kindling." "Did you haul it yourself?" Owen asked. "Dragged it in a sack," the boy said. "It kept snagging." "Next time, twist the top and tie it off," Owen said plainly. Stops it catching and blinked, nodded, then disappeared back inside. I stepped onto the porch beside him. "You are good with him." "Not often around children," he said. "But I remember being that age. Would have listened better if someone had spoken plain." "You speak plain," she said. Owen looked at her, his eyes steady. "It's the only way I know." That night, they fell into an easy rhythm. After supper, Mai laid out her mending, and Owen sat nearby with an old, cracked harness of hers stretched across his knees, methodically checking the leather. The silence was different now, not the hush of strangers, but the comfort of people beginning to belong in the same space. "Do you ever think of settling somewhere for good?" she asked, not looking up from her work. "I did once," he replied, his voice low. "North of Cheyenne. But the man who owned the land sold the place out from under me." He didn't sound bitter, just stated it as a fact. "The land here is held in my son's name," she said after a while. "No bank can touch it." Owen glanced up, a flicker of appreciation in his eyes. He didn't ask more, just went back to his work. The hearth crackled, and the wind outside began to rise. "You sleep in town?" she asked. "Room above the livery," he said. "It's mostly dry." "You're welcome to the cot in the corner," she said, her eyes still on her sewing. "If the drive back is too long." A quiet passed, filled only by the sound of a knife slicing through leather. "I'd stay then," he said at last. Before she turned in, she paused beside him. "I trust you," she said, her voice low but certain. His eyes met hers. "You have no reason to." "I think I do," she said, then reached out and touched his hand, just once, before stepping away. The wind howled against the eaves, but inside the little cabin, it was warm and still. By the end of the week, the harness was repaired, the oilcloth was nailed tight over the cracked pane, and Owen had made a habit of arriving just after sunrise. On Friday, the snow came, heavy and wet, trailing down from the sky without hurry. Mai watched it from the stoop. Owen came around the side of the cabin, his coat soaked, a bundle of kindling in his arms. "You'll catch a chill," she said. He set the wood down. "This is soft weather." He looked at her. "I was planning to ride back to town." "There's no need," she said, her voice even. "You can stay." He hesitated for only a moment. "You sure?" "I wouldn't have said it if I wasn't." He nodded once. That night, after Anne was asleep, Owen stayed by the fire. Mai folded laundry nearby. She didn't look at him when she spoke. "You ever think about what comes next?" Owen shifted slightly. "I don't make plans past the next sunrise. Keeps the ground steadier under my feet." "You ever want something steadier than that?" He leaned forward. "I might. If it came quiet and certain. If it didn't ask for more than I had to give." She turned toward him. "Do you think you found that here?" The fire cracked, and outside the snow whispered against the windows. "I think I found something," he said, his voice rough. "Still learning the shape of it." She walked over and sat across from him. "There's room here," she said. "For someone who works hard and keeps his word. And for someone who's made mistakes." "We all have," she said. "It's what we do after that counts." He reached out then, slowly, and touched her hand. Just the edge of his fingers against hers. She didn't pull away. Snow kept falling outside, thick and certain, burying the road to town. But inside the cabin, the quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting. The storm held for 2 more days. When it finally broke, the world was blanketed in a deep, silent white. Inside, my kneaded bread dough, her sleeves rolled to her elbows. Owen split logs near the hearth and sat nearby, carving a stick with careful focus. "You ever think about building something again?" I asked. "Not a place. A life." Owen crossed the room slowly. "I've thought about it more in the last few days than I have in years." "What stopped you before?" He looked out the frosted window. "I never found a place that felt worth staying for," and held up his carved stick. "It's a bird now." Owen took it gently. "You gave it wings." "You did that right." He met my eyes over the boy's head. "I've never had cause to stay in one place. But I see reason now. More than 1 inch." She stepped toward him, close enough to smell the cedar smoke clinging to his shirt. "There's room here. Not just in the cabin." He reached for her hand. "I'd like to stay. Not for the night. For good." I looked at her son, then back at Owen. He's old enough to remember what it means when someone leaves. Owen's hand tightened around hers. "Then I promise him this. I'll be here. I'll work this land and build a life with you both. No road ever looked better than this 1 inch." Tears rose in my eyes, but she didn't hide them. "Then stay," she said. "Stay and be part of this." He pulled her gently into his arms, and she leaned into him without hesitation, her face against his shoulder. Outside, the snow brightened under a cold sun, and the wind had quieted to nothing more than a breath. That spring, Owen built a new chicken coop with Anne, teaching him how to square corners and test a beam's strength by feel. He mended fences, planted corn with my in long, straight rows, and added a second-hand rocking chair beside the hearth. They married in June, beneath the cottonwoods near the creek. The preacher rode out from town, and I wore a simple blue dress and stood beside Owen, holding a ring fashioned from a silver coin Owen had carried for years. Afterward, they shared a meal at a table Owen had built, with bread I had baked and jam and had helped preserve. There was no music, but they danced anyway, barefoot in the dirt, laughing under the open sky. By the next winter, the cabin had a new roof, and the pantry shelves were lined with jars. And had grown taller, his cheeks full. He called Owen Pa without prompting. Sometimes at night, Owen would sit with my on the porch, her hand tucked into his, watching the land settle into sleep. He didn't speak much, but he didn't need to. She understood him now, the way one understands the grain of wood or how the wind carries stories if you wait long enough to hear them. This wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of all the rest.